Hi everyone, welcome to another Excel chart video. And in this lecture, what we're going to do is basically look at the top Excel chart styles that you can do and use to improve your reports. So what this video will do is cover several variations of this column chart here that you can later on adapt for your work. Now, as we go along with the variations, each one will get more minimalistic. Now, these chart variations are very easy to do and they can give an extra professional look for your work. So, what we're going to do is review each chart and then recreate that same chart effect, just to give you an idea of the steps we take to get to that look. Okay, so this is the first chart that we've got. Now, to get this look, we've covered this in another video, but in essence, you just apply three simple steps. The first step is that you make the borders rounded. The second step is you change the intensity of the bars. And the third step is you add a meaningful title. So if you are interested to see how we get this look originally, please check out the other video we've got. But what we're going to do for the context of this lecture is use this as a base template and then work our way towards the more minimalistic versions of our chart. So what I'm going to do is just make a copy of this chart, and we're going to look at this variation and then duplicate the steps taken to get to that. So in this chart, the difference between this and this one is basically just the removal of the grid lines. So comparing it to this initial chart, it just makes it a bit more minimalistic and gives us a bit more white space in the overall chart. Now, in terms of the grouping of the bars, because we've only got two data sets, it does look quite clean. And of course, if you're adding several charts of performance for different weeks, then sometimes when you've got less elements, it can make your overall report look a bit more spacious and less clogged. So to get this effect, all you need to do is just select your grid lines and then press delete on your keyboard. There you go. Okay, so moving on to the next variation. Now, what we've done here is basically added data labels and removed the y-axis values. Now, the reason that we've added the data labels is simply because when we remove the y-axis values without the data labels, you have no idea of the specific value for each data bar that is given. And without that, the only thing you'd really be able to tell is that on a certain day, either Jason or David has performed higher or lower than the other. And of course, you could do a comparison. For example, here, Wednesday, both Jason and David got their highest performance for the week versus the other days. However, that doesn't tell you what their performance was. And similarly, for the lowest performance of either of those individuals, it doesn't tell you what the figures are, only that on that particular day, they got the lowest performance, either in comparison to their own results or in comparison to the other one's results. So that's the reason why we add data labels, folks. And again, we're sticking with our removal of grid lines as well. So to get this effect, what you need to do is basically remove the grid lines as we've done before, and then right click on one data set and just add the data labels there. Now folks, you may notice that I'm using our original chart template, and that's just because it helps you to remember some of the steps if we repeat them for each subsequent variation. Okay, and then the last thing you need to do is basically just click on the y-axis values and then press delete. There. Right. Now, moving on to the next chart variation that we've got, what we've done here is remove the chart border. And this basically makes it look a bit more spacious on our chart. And it enables us to focus a bit more on our data bars, similarly to what we did in the previous chart. Now, if you had multiple weeks of charts that you're displaying on, for example, an A4 sheet of paper, by removing the chart borders, it looks like on the paper that you would have more space, even though you've got the same dimensions as you would on any typical A4 paper size. And that's because as we remove more elements of our chart, we're basically creating more white space overall. Another way to look at this is if, for example, you've got a car. Now, with normal cars where they've got roofs and everything, they look quite contained. So if you think of the chart, for example, this one, as a car with a normal roof, it looks quite contained. Now, on your car, if suddenly you remove the roof, let's say you have a convertible, and you press a button and the roof retracts, now when you look at your car, it looks a bit more open and a bit more spacious, even though all you've done is just taken off the roof. You know, your car seats are still the same, your steering wheel, your stereo, everything is still the same. But what's changed, it's because that you removed the roof of your car, it suddenly looks a bit more spacious inside. So you can think of the same thing for your chart. Because we removed the chart border, suddenly our chart looks much more spacious, and one could say, although it is slightly subjective, that it is a bit more easier to read because you removed that chart border, so there's less elements to focus on when you look at your chart. So to get this effect, what you need to do is simply select the chart border after you've removed all the other elements, although technically there is no specific order in which you can do this, but we're just recreating the previous steps that we've already done. And then once you've selected that border, do not press delete, because that will delete your chart. So for example, if I press delete now, you can see your chart will go. I'm just going to undo that. What you need to do is, once you've selected it, right click and then go to format chart area, go to border, and then just select no line. There. And you can see that our chart border is removed. Okay folks, so in the next chart variation we've got, what we've done is basically removed all the data labels except for the highest performance for each staff member and for the lowest performance for each staff member. With the onus being that if you're presenting this chart to, say, upper management, sometimes they might just want to see what the best performing days were and what the worst performing days were for each respective staff member. They might not be interested in the other values. So what we're doing here is basically zooming in or focusing in on what we think the audience might want. Now again, this is dependent on who you're producing the chart for, but going with the previous example of upper management, they would probably want to see the highest performing and lowest performing values. They might not be interested in the other values. So again, think about the end audience when you're doing this variation, but this is also a very powerful variation because it's just giving the user exactly what they want. So to replicate this variation, what you have to do is basically not add any data labels and just select a specific bar, which is, for example, the highest value for each staff member, and then repeat the same action, but instead you take the lowest value for each staff member. So to do that, you would need to know what the values are, first of all, and you get that in this instance by looking at the highest and lowest bars. So we can see that Wednesday and Saturday for David and Sunday for Jason are the values that we want to add data labels to. So what you need to do is click once, for example, to add a data label to Jason's highest performance, then click again to isolate that bar, and then right click and go add data label. And similarly, you do the same for David. And then just repeat for the lowest values. There. Okay, so that's how you do this variation. Okay folks, and for our last variation, what we basically do is focus in even more on the highest and lowest results by means of reducing the intensity of all the other bars except for the highest and lowest values, and making an amendment to the title to reflect the highest and lowest performance. Now, one thing to point out, folks, is that when you reduce the intensity for all the bars, your legend will show that reduction in intensity in the color key. However, by keeping the same tone of color for the highest and lowest bars, but just increasing their intensity, or vice versa, reducing the intensity of the other bars, as long as it's the same color, then you're okay on the legend. The trick is just to make sure that you reduce it by enough so that the user can correctly identify which dataset belongs to which user, and the highest and lowest performing bars as well. So first reduce everything in terms of the intensity of the bars, and then revert the intensity back to our original style for the highest and lowest values. There. Okay. Now, to increase the intensity or revert it back to what we had before, but just for the highest and lowest values, what you need to do is just click once on the highest value and then click again. So it's similar to what you do for the data labels in the previous chart we created. And again, we're going to be putting that in as well. So you can actually combine both steps for this stage. And then add the data label. There. And then the last change you have to do is just to amend the title. Okay. So that concludes this video. We have seen how we can go from our initial chart all the way through to a minimalistic version. We have highlighted how to do these changes, and by repeating the steps for each subsequent variation, we have reinforced the things that you need to do to get each look. And each of these variations can be used in your report, but the main key element is, who is the report for? What's your end audience? Based on that, you can work backwards and decide which variation to go for when you're presenting these charts to somebody. Now, these steps, once you get the hang of them, they're really simple, quick, and easy to do. Okay, so that concludes this video, folks. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have any questions or queries, please feel free to reach out in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That would be appreciated. And if you're interested in more of these types of videos, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks and have a great day.